What would you do if you were accused of something that you didn't do? This happened a lot in the Salem witch trials, and a lot of the people who were accused of being a witch had to either confess to save their lives, or deny being guilty and then still get hung. The Salem witch trials was an outbreak of witch accusations that took place in Salem Village, Massachusetts, in January of 1961 to 1962, according to Mary Beth Norton in her book The Devil's Snare. After researching, I have learned a lot about the Salem witch trials, and I'm going to share with you the history of the Salem witch trials, like how the outbreak started, and the outcome of the events, and maybe some explanations for why it happened. So let's go back in time to the beginning of the trials. To fully understand the outbreak of witch trials, we have to remember that in Salem, most of the citizens were Puritans. So, because they were Puritans, a lot of the citizens had a very strict outlook on life and religion, which made them less tolerant of other branches of Christianity. In the Salem witch trials, Don Nardo says, quote, "The strictness of Puritan laws and customs relating to religious worship was matched by the harsh manner in which society treated many of its members," end quote. Knowing that the citizens of Salem's were less accepting of people and less accepting of any mistakes can explain a lot about why the witch trials broke out in such a havoc. Since the people were very closed-minded, they didn't think very much about why maybe people were struggling or why they were different. They just thought that there was something wrong with them and that they needed to be punished for it. The first rumors of witches existing began when 9-year-old Betty Paris and her cousin 11-year-old Abigail Williams started to have little fits. These fits were pretty much kind of like what you would see if you've ever watched the movie Paranormal Activity. They were contorting their bodies in weird ways and acting in ways that they had never acted. So those two girls, plus another girl, had those symptoms, as Jess Blumberg wrote about in her Smithsonian Magazine article. The children were pressured into accusing other people of being witches after they had been taken to the doctor and their symptoms were described as being kind of possessed by a supernatural creature. So these children then accused 3 other women of being witches, which was the start of the trials. Blumberg described this in A Brief History of the Salem Witch Trials. This was just the beginning of the disastrous outbursts in Salem. After many trials, the Salem witch trials had to meet their end before the entire town was accused. Many people that were in positions of power were starting to be accused of being witches. Their families would be accused of being witches, which ultimately led to the end of the trials. The jails were being completely overfilled, and so there was a big backup of people who were accused of being witches, and they couldn't fit everybody in jail. According to Don Nardo in his book The Salem Witch Trials, quote, "The number of girls who were accused by Abigail Williams rose to at least 40, end quote. This was the same girl that kind of started the first witch trial, and she accused 40 people of being witches. This shows that many people were being accused who weren't witches, and because of the Puritan outlook on life, citizens of Salem just openly trusted an 11-year-old girl who was telling everybody that there were so many witches, and everybody was trying for it. So once these people in high power started to be accused of being witches, the trials finally came to an end, and the last people that were in jail were beginning to go through the last trials. With the trials over, Salem was completely changed. There were still many people left in jail, but some of the people who were in the jail were freed after the trials ended. The trials came to a conclusion, but there were still many questions that were unanswered. It wasn't until far after the Salem witch trials occurred when an answer was kind of given on what may have caused the supernatural actions of the children. According to the TED Ed, what really happened during the Salem witch trials by Brian A. Palvak, quote, some have speculated that the girls were suffering from hallucinations caused by fungus or a condition that caused swelling of the brain, end quote. None of this can be said for certain, but it is probable that something as simple as a medical problem could have caused this huge uproar and led to the Salem witch trials. So groupthink and hysteria just let this entire thing keep going on and on until it became a huge problem in Salem. Overall, according to Christina Garcia in Possessed, the Salem Witch Trials, quote, in total, between 144 and 185 people were accused of witchcraft. 19 people were executed, 14 women and 5 men, end quote. What happened to the town of Salem, Massachusetts in the 17th century carries many important lessons to today. Being Puritan gave the citizens of Salem a harsh outlook on life, which really let the trials take off, and it was like the gasoline to the fire. Because of their strict outlook on life and their very closed-minded views, the Salem witch trials just kept going on and became a huge deal when really it should have just stopped after the 2 children were accusing so many people. Nobody should have trusted 2 little girls who were throwing fits and tantrums that they didn't usually throw. It's not fair to just trust what a girl says when there are so many other people telling you that it's not true. It's important that we remember the history of Salem so that way we don't repeat these same mistakes of groupthink and of having a closed mind about many things. It is not the common people that are remembered in life. It is the unique thinkers who make a good change in the world. You need to remember this so that way you can make sure that you create the history you want.